killing me here.
Get ready. You're listening to Give God 90 live.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Welcome everyone to Give God 90. It is live on a Thursday night. I gotta kind of keep track of where I'm at here. It's been hot today, and we got a lot accomplished, got a lot of things done.
Yes.
Tonight, I'm kind of starting off slow here on purpose, just a little bit, because hoping some folks will join us on Facebook Live, and really chat is open on Spreaker. And here's the kicker: for all the Spreaker folks who can't get Facebook, you're going to hear something tonight because I'm going to show something off just a little bit. But the good thing about that is maybe I'll put a picture up somewhere where my Spreaker listeners can get to it. Okay. We've had a lot of people do things for us over a period of time, and we appreciate all the support we've gotten.
We do.
People give us things, they donate money, and tonight we are wearing something one of our listeners, one of our friends of Give God 90, took our logo.
It's probably going to be
mirrored
image,
but there it is. And if it's easier for you that stand up a little bit. You're short, stand up. There you go. It's on the back too. So there it is. And that's what my Spreaker listeners aren't going to be able to see because it's audio only.
Right.
Okay. So don't think that when we're talking about having people support us, that it's always just throwing money at us.
Right.
There's lots of ways to help us do what we do. Pam chose this particular way because, she appreciates what we do and wanted to give something back. But you can also go to givegod90.com. You can look on there, and there's books to buy.
There is.
There's 2 of my books.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I shouldn't say 2 of my only 2.
Only 2.
And hopefully that's the only 2.
And I'm not writing any.
And there's also a link there to some of the photographs I've taken. And those pictures are, I'm not going to say my favorites, but they're the best of what I consider the best. I've got some other really good ones, but I don't think they're that quality that people would want on their artwork on their wall, or a shower curtain, or a onesie for their child, or something like that. But that is there. They are available. There's lots of ways you can support us. And of course, there is that button down there where you can push it and throw money at us if you want to. I mean, we're not going to throw it back at you, that's for sure. So, again, chat on Spreaker's open. If you haven't downloaded the Give God 90 app, that's a good thing to do. It takes about a minute to download that. It's absolutely free. And you get the audio feed, and that typically comes out 2 times a week. It comes out Mondays and Thursdays. Usually I try to get one out on Monday and Thursday. And then there's the live we do with Facebook only on Thursday nights, because that's just the most convenient night where nobody else is doing anything, typically. Even though in the summertime, people are busy all the time anyway.
Right.
So, all the advertisements over. All the advertisements are done. Tonight, we are going to look at a really interesting dynamic, and sometimes it's quite fascinating dynamic, and that is adult children with elderly parents. Or, if you really want to be interesting about that, you can say elderly parents with adult children. I mean, it works either way, right?
Either way.
So, have it your way. Whichever way you want to put it.
Either way, it can be a real conundrum if it's
It can be quite confusing sometimes, and for the folks watching on Facebook, yeah, I am checking my speaker connection and make sure that it is where it needs to be, because sometimes I have people tell me that they can't hear it, but I can hear it here, so I am going to assume that it's okay and everything's working, and that works. Okay. Elderly parents with adult children. This is something that we're going through, kind of. We went through it once.
We went through it once.
My parents passed away 6 years ago.
Yes.
And that was an interesting thing. But I'm not really wanting to talk about end of life type stuff. What I want to look at is how you understand, how you transition from these parent figurehead type people. Does that make sense? They've been
Yes.
The head of a family for years and years and years. They've been guiding that family for a very long time. They've been instructing that family for a long time. And now they sort of, in their waning years, have to, I don't want to say give up the authority, but they sort of have to transition out of that figurehead and more into, I don't know exactly how to describe it. They're still really the head of the family in a way.
True.
But they're not in that position where they are the ultimate authority anymore. Because now, when you have elderly parents who have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, in some cases great-great-grandchildren, now you have someone else under them who is really taking the place of where they were, because now this other parents have been doing the same thing for a very long time. They have children, grandchildren, sometimes great-grandchildren. They come along. So now we have the elderly parents who are getting ready. I guess retirement's not really a good word either for that.
No, because you're like 60-something when you retire.
Well, that's what we think about, but
Right.
but
I mean, that's retirement.
when
age,
they
so
stop. And I don't think they ever really stop being the parent, which is
No.
part of the problem. And I don't want to say it's part of the
They
problem.
will always be
they'll
the
always
parent.
be the parent, but
and they will always expect you to listen to them no matter what.
exactly. And therein lies some of the difficulties and some of the obstacles that people experience when they go through this. Now, it would be very, very easy if something would happen. If everybody involved would follow the Creator's instructions, it would be really simple. And people at this point should be going, wait a minute, what instructions? You can go look through the book of Genesis all you want. You're not going to find a really good set of instructions where this is what we do to take care of our elderly parents. You know why?
Because it's not in there.
It's not in there. Every situation is unique. Every situation is different. If we look at Adam and Eve, who lived, 900 years, over 900 years, we're going to look at them and say, well, by the time they died, they had many, many children. We aren't given an exact number how many children, but they also had grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren.
I bet that family tree was huge by
They
the time
had-
they were 900.
They had thousands of family members, right?
Right.
The Adam and Eve family reunion would have been huge after 900 years.
Right.
The reason we don't see how they were taken care of in their old age is very simple. We look at things in Scripture and we tend to say, well, that's exactly how I have to do it. But we're not Adam and Eve. We don't live 900 years. So we can't do it that way.
Right.
We're not even Sarah and Abraham. We can't do it that way. And I probably wouldn't live through Hagar anyway. So, you even though it might have been your idea, you'd shoot me a long time ago. But I'm really surprised that didn't bring a comment up. But anyway, what we're seeing is this transition, but we really are kind of going through it individually, but at the same time we're going through it with a group, right?
Right.
Because even though the children have to work through this, and they are trying to do things together for the benefit of the parents have to work through this. They're trying to do things for the benefit of the children. So their ultimate goal is always the same, but they might not always see that they're going to get there the same way. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, adult children in this situation they'll see their parents aging and maybe health-wise not as vigorous as they used to be, not as maybe mentally sometimes sound as they used to be. With aging, a lot of times in many cultures, we get the health issues like diabetes, heart failure, all kinds of health issues. So now the adult children are faced with this decision that I've heard many, many times. Well, they took care of me when I was young. It's my job to take care of them when they're old. Folks, believe me when I say this. There are some people you don't want taking care of you, like me. Myra can take care of people, and she's good at it. That's what she does. I'm not. You don't want somebody like me taking care of you. So in that situation, yeah, she could step in and do that, but she has other obligations too, like taking care of her grandchildren and other things, making sure that she goes to work, making sure that the people at work are satisfied with her job. I've said often that you don't want me taking care of anybody. If you don't have 4 legs, whinny, moo, bah, or neigh, you don't want me taking care of you. It's that simple. Animals are easy to take care of because animals are the same all the time. You know what to expect. It's just easy. When you see a certain look on their face, you know what they're going to do. People, you never know what they're going to do. And it drives me absolutely bonkers because I don't know what they're doing. Now, just because I can't take care of people doesn't mean that other people can't take care of people. So for me, even though I really did. I spent nights here with my mother before she passed away, and my brother did too, and he's a lot like me, not the type of person you really want taking care of you. I'm afraid to ask what you're remembering. The power washer? Yep. The joke in the family was, folks, for everybody who's listening, is my father experienced with his colon cancer certain types of incontinence. And, most people would be very patient in cleaning that type of thing up. My brother and I said, there's a power washer outside. We can use that. Easy.
That's why we didn't leave him with you.
Yeah, that's why we didn't leave him with us. So, and you have to maintain a certain amount of humor in these situations, because if you don't, it will get under your skin. It will drag you down, and it will cause you to be depressed somewhat. If you don't keep that amount of humor in that type of thing, and you don't see what's funny in some of these situations,
yes.
My brother was staying with my mother one night, and she had just gotten a new recliner. Well, she had actually slid down into the recliner to the point where it tilted forward. And now my mother was not even though she was short, she was not a small person.
No.
She was not quite as big around as she was tall, but she was close. So she was a rather large lady for being short. And To hear my brother tell this story about how she slid down in this thing and he was working to get her out of it. After the fact, it was hilarious.
It was.
And
the way he tells stories, it
yeah.
kind of...
And quite often, as long as nobody really gets hurt or dies, it's it can be funny.
Mm-hmm.
So as we work through these things to experience these things, we see different things going on. One of the problems that occurs quite often actually begins when the person who is now an adult child is very young. And that is the parent is protective of this child, and so they don't always impart the correct information to the child. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they lie to the child. There's these things that we have called the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny for some of the minor things. Now, as these children get older, of course, they discover that that's fantasy. Mm-hmm. It's not real. So now the parent has to decide when they stop protecting the child from information and protect the child using information. And that's sometimes a very difficult thing to decide depending on the child, because different children mature at different ages. But fast forward, 40, 50, 60 years, mm-hmm. all right? Now you have this situation where this elderly parent does the same thing. Sometimes elderly parents don't always tell their children the truth. They hide certain medical information. Mm-hmm. They hide certain financial information. And I want to be careful here. I'm not saying that parents need to tell their children every little detail. But there's certain things that children need to know.
Mm-hmm. There is.
They need to know about your health situation.
Mm-hmm.
They absolutely need to know that. They absolutely need to know what your final wishes are. Where do you want to stay as you age? Where do you want to be? How do you want to live? How do you, where do you see yourself? Now, it would be really, really nice if elderly parents would remember all of the things like life insurance that they purchased through the years, so that the kids don't have to be surprised as they're going through the paperwork after they're deceased to find these things. It would also be really nice if elderly parents wouldn't hide money.
Right.
I know this happens. I've seen it happens with us. It happened to us. And again, elderly parents don't have to give every detail, but there's certain important need-to-know information, mm-hmm. Just because you might, as an elderly parent, if you forget where you put some finances and you don't say anything about, well, they've dealt with this, the kids might be thinking, well, you dealt with this bank all your life, and all of a sudden you realize that there's money in another bank. That doesn't always work mm-hmm. on the benefit of the children. The good thing is more and more older people are beginning now to understand this. Mm-hmm. And they're actually doing things. And unfortunately, in the United States, the tax code has made it very necessary for people who have anything such as homes or real estate, any type of real property, that the tax burdens on the children are such that parents realize this, and they are actually making arrangements to lessen that burden. The one thing I will say about that is, if you have made those arrangements, make sure about every 2 years, parents, elderly parents, whoever set that up for you, you call them and tell them to review that and make sure that it's still up to date, because laws change every day now, practically every day, and policies change throughout the bureaucracies, and if that's not maintained, as I guess is a good way to put that, it could actually wind up costing your children money in the long run. Mm-hmm. So make sure that all of that stuff stays up to date. That's another one of those important need-to-know things for the kids. Now, folks that are very poor typically don't think they have to worry about that, but they do.
They do.
The one thing, you worked hard all your life. You may not want to burden your children with certain information, but they need to know this so that they can be prepared in case something needs to happen. A lot of times, as people age with their health problems, they're in and out of hospitals. They're in and out of care facilities. They're doing different things. And parents, elderly parents, need to understand that the more information your children have about finances, whether you have them or not, really, seriously, whether you have finances or whether you don't have finances, it's equally important for those kids to know.
Right.
It's just one of those things you've got to talk about. You might not want to, but you got to talk about it. Something else that elderly parents don't recognize all the time is, especially, let me start over. Something that elderly parents who brought their kids up in church. There's a good way to say that. What the elderly parents don't always understand is they may have always tried to teach their children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren that you honor your mother and father, right? Mm-hmm. Exodus 20:12, I think, is honor your mother and father. Well, how does a 4-year-old honor his mother and father? They can't, really, because they don't know, they don't understand the decision. Know. The honor your mother and father is for the older children, the adult children. But there's a problem with this because the adult parents who are becoming elderly parents, they have to understand that they have to allow their children to honor them. You can't honor somebody if they don't let you. It's impossible. You can do everything you think is right, but if that elderly parent is working against you, it's very difficult to honor that. It's very difficult to do things. You may be doing everything, following all of the instructions that the Almighty gives you about dealing with this, making sure that certain things are done, but if that elderly parent is working against you, it is very, very, very difficult to carry out that command. Sometimes, and this is going to sound funny in this conversation, sometimes the best thing you can do in that situation is step back and say, you know what? You're not ready for me to help you. So you do this on your own for right now, and we'll have this conversation later. My mother was, I'll be polite. My mother liked to be in control of every situation. She liked people doing exactly what she thought that they should do.
Right.
And sometimes that didn't always work. You cannot always honor someone when what they want you to do is not what the Almighty wants you to do. You cannot always honor someone when what they want you to do goes against what God's telling you. You can't honor someone. It's very, very difficult to honor someone who is telling you one thing to go this direction and God's pointing you in a different direction. So parents, you've got to be aware that even though these children are trying to honor you, they're trying to carry out your desires, your wishes, they're trying to make sure that everything that you have wanted and all the instructions that you've given this family for a long, long time, you've got to give them the opportunity to do that. Because if you don't give them the opportunity to do that, you're working against them. Even though your goal may be the same, if you're continually forcing them a different direction, you're not working towards the same goal at that point. Mm-hmm. Even though they want to get to the same place you're going. It's kind of like somebody described it one time. If it was a sailboat situation, if the person working the sails and the person working the rudder aren't going the same direction, you're not going to get where you're going. that I need to touch on with this conversation, and that is elderly parents who begin to experience what's the correct term for it? Not dementia. What do they call it?
Alzheimer's?
No, altered mental status.
Altered mental
Status. They may not be diagnosed with dementia. They may not be diagnosed with Alzheimer's, but sometimes when medications get screwed up, it creates what is known as altered mental status. That can wreak havoc on a family. That can, people take things personally, and really that's tough when that happens because you can't do it when you're dealing with someone like that. You kind of got to let it roll off your back, kind of like water off a duck's back. The old saying is. Sometimes that's really hard to do. I'll be the first one to admit that's really hard to do. But here's the thing. If that person is truly experiencing altered mental status, they don't know what they're saying. All they know is something in their life isn't right at that particular moment. It may be right 5 minutes from now. It may be right 30 seconds from now.
Right.
But at that particular time, it's not right.
Mm-hmm.
So,
you can't really hold against them anything they say, do, or any actions they perform because they aren't aware that it's wrong.
Exactly.
Or right, or whichever
Exactly.
way.
A friend of ours, he put his, I think she's 92 or 93-year-old mother in a home because they tried to take care of her. They couldn't take care of her. She actually does have Alzheimer's. And they found they did it for as long as they could. And, he says when the family goes to see her, she can get belligerent. Now, when the family's not there, the people that work in the home say, oh, she's the sweetest person in the world. That happens.
Mm-hmm.
It's a real thing.
It does.
Because she's in a place that she doesn't always recognize.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that happens in their own home.
It does.
My father was raised in the same home. He lived there for over 80 years. And
the very home you see the wall of.
Yeah. In this home, he lived here for over 80 years. One of the things he said one day is, well, I guess I need to go home. And I looked at him and I said, well, I thought this was home. And he looked around. He said, I wouldn't live in a place like this. He lived here for 80 years. He would never move, never think of moving. Mm-hmm. But in that altered mental status moment, that was, he needed to go home, wherever that happened to be.
Mm-hmm. Wherever home was in his mind at that
wherever
time.
home was in his mind, and whatever color the sky was in the world he was living in at the moment, that's fine. But that kind of thing happens. The other thing we really need to touch on is elderly parents who are extremely strong-willed. We don't know anybody like that at all, do we?
No, never met any of them.
That can be another difficult thing to use. There's obstacles that happen. Typically, especially in the United States today, you have elderly parents who've lived in a home for a very, very long time. They're convinced that that's where they want to live out their days. They want to die in this home that they've lived in. Mm-hmm. They raise their kids here. Oh, this is where I want to die. This is, however that may be. Don't be afraid, adult parents. If you need to convince them for their own good, using whatever information you have at the time, don't be afraid to use outside sources.
Right.
There's a lot of organizations out there. A really good friend of ours, his mother's going through this right now. They're going through that with his mother. Mm-hmm. In her home, it's an old farmhouse. The wiring in it won't accept air conditioning.
Right.
And through the last couple of weeks, we've had some really, really hot weather. And for her benefit, they needed her to be in a place with air conditioning,
Right.
so that she could live
Right.
and eventually return to her house.
Exactly. When the weather cooled down.
But the thing is, she didn't want to go.
No.
She was convinced that if she left, nobody was going to bring her home.
Right.
So they were able to bring some folks in, and you actually offered to talk to her, but didn't need to, thankfully.
No.
So as that, don't be afraid to utilize those outside sources. There's a lot
Right.
of really, really great organizations, especially in the state we live in. Don't be afraid to reach out to them for some assistance as you're going through
And
that.
I'm going to use the word hospice care is amazing. And that doesn't mean the end of life. It doesn't mean,
Right.
okay, people hear hospice, they think, okay, you're going to die in the next week. We had hospice for your dad for how long? 5 years?
About 5 years.
It's good to have hospice in because they can help with the transition.
Right.
They can help you with any medical needs you might have, whether it be a hospital bed, whether it be assistance with medications, home supplies. They even, for somebody that needs diapers, they furnish that. I mean, and it's no cost to you because you're under their covering at that point. So no matter what you need, when you need it, they're there for you. So don't be afraid to start with a hospice early. Don't wait till the very end. Have them in there. They're a good resource. They have counseling. They have people that know everything about everything. And anything you need or questions about or just need somebody to talk to, they're there.
And I don't know if all of them do it or not, but I know the one we used will actually take whatever patient they're taking care of and put them, if the family's taken care of them, they will put them in a home for a couple of days to give the family a little bit of relief.
A respite,
So,
yes.
that is something that, don't be afraid to use those services. There's a lot of things you can do when you're dealing with these elderly parents, and elderly parents are dealing with adult children. There's a lot of things you can do, a lot of outside help you can go to say, okay, here's my problem, here's where I'm at, what do I do? How do I work through this?
Right.
How do I overcome the obstacle where I am right now?
Right. They might not be there 24/7, but they can
Right.
point you in directions to help you out at least.
Right. There's a lot of good resources out there today that will help with that. Don't be afraid to use it. And adult children, don't think that because you need to request that help, don't think for a second that
makes you weak.
It makes you weak. It doesn't.
It
what
keeps
what
you
you're
strong.
doing is you need those resources
Yes.
because not everybody can do that. That might not be the skill that the Almighty give to you. You might have completely different skills.
Right.
Yeah.
Or even if you have those skills, you get burned out.
You do.
Especially if you're working a job, taking care of the parents, trying to take care of your own life.
Yeah.
It gets stressful. And
does.
sometimes you just need somebody to come sit with a family member for 2 or 3 hours while you go out and have dinner with your husband.
Or go shopping.
Or go shopping. Or actually
Go get
your
groceries.
hair done or nails done, depending on...
It depends. It all depends
know?
on what your need is at the time.
Right.
But at the same time, we need to look at the elderly parent side of that and say, okay, elderly parents, don't be afraid to accept that help. That works both ways. You can try to help somebody and try to help somebody and try to help somebody, but if they refuse,
Right.
The person who's trying to help sooner or later is going to get the idea that
They're not wanted.
They're not wanted. And that's tough for an adult child. It really is. That's hard on adult children to look at a situation and say, I'd really like to do something for mom or dad, but they won't let me.
Right.
And that's a conversation you need to have with them. And approach it that way. Be honest, be open.
Sometimes if you just look at your parent and say, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I want to do for you, but I'm losing my mind.
Yeah.
Sometimes that comes around and they're like, okay,
And
maybe, but let them know they're not a burden.
Right.
You just need a break.
and I've said this before, if you're honest and they get mad, they're not going to stop being your mom and dad.
No.
You're not going to stop being their child.
Mm-mm.
They'll get over it. Especially when they understand the point where you're trying to help the only way you know how, and more importantly, chances are the way they taught you to help.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that a lot of parents don't understand. They raise you, they teach you these things, they give you the instructions to help others, but then when it comes time to receiving that help that they've taught you to help others with,
They don't want
they kind of arch their back and say, I don't need that right now. I'm not at that point in my life yet.
Because we've seen both our parents
Right.
take care of old elderly people.
Yeah.
And yet,
Yeah.
we still get headbutted.
They didn't want to receive. Your parents don't like to receive help either. They're a little
No.
more willing to receive help than mine were,
Mm-hmm.
to a certain degree.
To a certain degree. As long as they have a say in it.
Yeah. And that's really
And
what
that's
it needs
fine.
to be, because, like I said, you're trying to achieve the same goal. You're trying to maintain that family dynamic through a transition now of, and I wish there was a really good way to describe when an elderly parent gets to the point where they really kind of back away from the head of the family type of situation. There's just no real good word to describe that. You know, they're still head of the family, but they're not active at it anymore.
Right.
They're no longer, and it just popped into my head. Could you imagine Adam at 900 years old trying to run his household?
Thousands and
the
thousands.
of grandchildren, great-grandchildren.
No.
You know, how in the world could one person do that? It's impossible.
Mm-mm.
So, you know, it's hard enough simply being a grandparent, you know, making sure that grandchildren kind of do the things they're supposed to be doing, and making sure that young adult children are doing the things that they should be doing. You know, one of the things that is a obstacle to overcome is when adult children come to you and say, I need help, and you say, okay, what do you need? And you help them, and then they turn around and do just the opposite. You know, it's frustrating. It really is. It makes you want to, you know, kind of strangle them a little bit. But at the same time, they have to figure out, you know, what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully they figure it out before they become adult children taking care of elderly parents.
Well, we already know where we stand with one of our kids on that one.
Yes, you know, our oldest granddaughter says that she wants to have a good job, make lots of money, so she doesn't have to take care of us. She can just put us in a nice home. And I said, well, as long as it's a really nice home, you know, I don't care. You know, but it really needs to have some really great amenities.
Yeah. Hot tubs.
That would be nice. You know, I don't play golf, but, you know, whatever. Have something out there for the old folks to do, you know. I don't.
Skeet.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I don't sit around and play cards or anything like that, but hopefully when I get to be wanting a rocking chair, that's going to be, about 50 years from now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, I can spend my last 10 years in a rocking chair. The Almighty says you have up to 120 years. I plan on
120.
holding him up to that. You know, as long as I keep doing what he tells me to do, you know, I figure I'm going to stick around. And about 120, about 110, maybe I'll get a rocking chair, and then people can sit at my feet like they did Gamaliel, and I'll pass along important need-to-know information.
Oh, dear.
As long as I can remember it. Adult children have a desire to take care of their parents. Sometimes it's because, you know, they feel obligated, but hopefully for the most part it's because they have just a want to.
Mm-hmm.
They know that it's the right thing to do. They know that they can honor their parents, they can honor their Creator by doing everything that they can to care for their adult children, or I'm sorry, their adult parents, elderly parents. Yeah, it's been a long day. The adult parents, they know that they can honor their elderly parents, but the elderly parents have to work with them and accept, that their kids are trying to honor them.
Right.
It's just another one of those family dynamics. Would it be nice if we had the instructions that say, well, Adam did it this way, Abraham did it this way, David did it this way, and you get three choices here. You could either do it Adam's way, you can do it Abraham's way, or you can do it David's way.
Oh no, he's got a British sense of humor. How you come up with your own way to do it?
That's exactly right. We see one of the things that Yeshua did, one of the last things he actually did when he was hanging on the cross was he looked at John and Mary and he said, John, you take care of Mary. She's your responsibility now. See, we don't know if John succeeded at that. Mm-hmm. We know where he wound up. We have a lot of stories about him. One of them says, that they tried to kill him so many different ways. They tried to boil him alive in oil. They still couldn't kill him, so they put him out on an island of Patmos, and that's where he lived out his days. We don't know if Mary was still alive at that point or not. Mm-hmm. So, was John able to be successful at caring for Mary? We don't know.
Don't know. Maybe he
We're not told.
Gave somebody else charge over Mary.
It could be. It's possible.
Who knows?
The only thing we know for sure is that Yeshua tried to do what he could to make sure that and I don't think she was very elderly at that time. She was only about 13 years older, so she'd have been in her 40s. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that would have been considered elderly then.
No.
But he was making sure that she was cared for the best way he could under his circumstances. It was up to John at that point. Did he succeed? Did he not succeed? I see Pam's watching now. See this, Pam?
We got your shirt on.
Thank you.
Love them.
But as all of that happens, we look at these dynamics and we say, what's best for us? And if I was going to give anybody any advice about this, it would be simply this. You take the information you have and you make the best decision you can make. 6 months from now, 5 minutes from now, you might, that information might change. But as long as you've made the best decision you can make based on what the Almighty wants you to do.
Right.
That's all you can do. It might change in a minute. It might change in a year.
It might change 50 times from the time you start till the time you finish.
It might. But just do the best you can with the information that you have on hand. Mm-hmm. And don't try to second guess yourself because you don't know. You can't see 5 minutes into the future. You can't see 5 seconds into the future. Mm-hmm. All we know is that something is right there just out of reach. And that's what we're trying to grab hold of. So, is there anything that you want to add to adult children with elderly parents or elderly parents with adult children?
I think I'm good for now.
Did you like how I fit Adam into all that?
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of cool, wasn't it?
Yes.
If you didn't see the beginning of this, you need to go back and listen to the beginning because I actually brought Adam in a kind of a weird kind of a way because people don't realize how huge his family must have been in all of that time. We're only told about a few, but it was big. Ladies and gentlemen, we certainly thank you for joining us. Thank you very much for all of the kind words from Myra showing off the kids last week. I think that's really why she had them here. Really, I think so. She really is proud of her family, and I am too most of the time. They irritate sometimes, but that's okay. That's what families do. Mm-hmm. You get over it most of the time. So, I think we can say have a wonderful, wonderful week. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a pleasure. We are so glad that for everybody that joins us on Facebook, watches later, everybody that listens on speaker and watches us later, we appreciate it so very, very, very much.
Yes, we do.
You have a wonderful, wonderful week.